What's up, guys? So we're back post Vegas content. I know we were kind of dwelling on that for a while, but I'm going to try to put the past behind me and whatever losses, can stay in the past. But around that time, we kind of glossed over the fact that Gladiator Beasts have won their first Edison major tournament basically since the Edison revival. Anyone who played back in 2010 can tell you that Gladiator Beasts were one of the most popular decks. Like at SJC Edison, a lot of the side decks were containing things like Mirror of Oaths and a lot of anti-GB cards. But with the revival, these decks have really fallen off, and people have really been sleeping on Glads, in my opinion. I've always been a bit of a Glad believer. I still don't think they're secretly one of the best decks or anything like that. But when I look at other people's tier lists and they're placing Glads really low, they think Glads are just a joke. Memes about they can't beat a 1900 attacker, all these things. I think Glads are pretty misunderstood. And that's why I'm glad that Mr. Spyral, a duelist that you should all know and that I respect a lot, was able to actually take home first place at Peak of the Beak 5 with Glads. And so I want to talk about his deck list and some of the ideas behind it. So this is Spyral's GB deck, and there's a few things that really stick out about it at first. So you have a super high monster lineup, 20 monsters. Sometimes you see really, really low monster counts, like 13, 14 monsters. Other times, I would say standard is more in like the 16 to 18 range. But because he's playing 3 of these test apes, which is a card that has been becoming a little bit popular, sometimes in combination with Creature Swap, he's also maxing on the Prisma engine as well. We'll talk more about that in a second, but he basically like putting all of the engines that people sometimes splash with, just in kind of with the goal of having the most live summons in the early game. And he's also including Hoplimus, which I think is a great card right now. No Secutor, not really going for those like early auto wins, just kind of like controlled game plan, which GBs are really good at. Really slim spell count, still maining Heavy Storm. GBs need to push in for those big plays. Doesn't matter if you're storming some of your own cards. 1 Book of Moon, typically thought of as pretty good in Glads, but Book of Moon stocks are kind of falling. Only 2D Prison, Compulse main deck, and then kind of the star of the show, these 2 hero signals. Now, for those of you that don't know, because I definitely didn't know for a while, trap card, very old trap card. When a monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, special summon 1 level 4 or lower elemental hero monster from your deck. Now, whoever designed this probably imagined in an elemental hero strategy, but we're just using it to tutor out Prisma or maybe Stratos sometimes from your deck. And if you have a play like Test Ape with Hero Signal, you can crash the Test Ape, get a Glad, Hero Signal for Prisma, and send Bestiari, and then you have an instant Geyserus in your main phase 2. So that's really the bread and butter of the deck. That's what the deck's trying to achieve. I will say that over the course of the tournament, it seems that Spyral did not resolve these hero signal combos very often, but maybe just the knowledge that he had it was a deterrence to the opponent. I don't really know. 2 Chariot and not very good against Blackwing. You don't always want to clog on 3. And then the side, pretty standard. Another copy of Rediari, more Dust Tornadoes, more Chariots, and then just a bunch of hate floodgates and things like that. So I also want to give a quick shout out to Playtest IRL, and I'm not sure if that's him in this video or one of his friends, but he actually kind of put us on to this hero signal GB strategy. As far as I know, he's the first one to experiment with this card. I had never seen it before this, and I shared it with our team chat with Spyral involved, and he and I both kind of worked on the deck. I will say his deck is totally his. I had made a different version of it, so definitely not trying to take any credit from him other than we did talk about this video. But yeah, shout out to whoever this guy is, Playtest IRL. I think I met him at Vegas, but the guy in the video, I'm not sure. But interesting idea and definitely inspired us. So just to spice up, add a little more ceiling to the deck as well, which has always been GB's problem in a sense. And so real quick, I want to take a look at a couple of the replays. This is finals, and also I want to say, if you look at the matchups he had in top 8, I don't want to take anything away from Spyral ever. I think he's a fantastic player who has had success in a number of retro formats, and even just in Edison, like, it's definitely a name you should know. But here, you know, he got first, and Dragon Turbo, Plant Frogs, Hero Frogs, Frog Monarch, you know, another Plant Frog deck, which is another cool deck maybe I'll cover soon, but these are pretty favorable matchups for Glads, let's be real. Value Turbo not so favorable, but still kind of even, I would say. So there is an element that he got some favorable matchups, especially like the top 4, top 8 matches. You know, I think you could say those are relatively favorable, but I still think GBs are a very strong deck that honestly you should consider, and they're pretty fun to play. I find GBs fun to play. I know the opponent, people hate playing against him, but I also think that people need to, you know, get their head out of the sand a little bit and learn how to play against Glads, because once you know how to play against them, I think the matchup becomes a lot less scary. Anyway, I want to take a look at his finals replay, as well as one other that I found really interesting. Now, I gotta be honest, these are relatively straightforward games, just in the sense that playing against Dragon Turbo can always be kind of a race for you to find your setup or them to OTK you, and especially with Glads, that's sort of your MO. So knowing that he is on GBs, I think influences Ghost Rider's plays quite a bit here, because establishing a big monster is always kind of what you want to do. Makes them have to use an extra card like a Tiger or Rescue Cat. In this case, he has, you know, the full combo, and he can do this Prisma Geysera's play. Since the quest went to graveyard turn 1, that allows him for an easy Heraklinos here, and Heraklinos, as anyone should be able to figure out, you know, is one of the strongest cards against Dragon Turbo specifically. It's great against a lot of decks, but a lot of decks, you know, can out it more than you might think when you're not backed up by trap cards. But in this deck, you know, it just solos them completely. He would need specifically a Dragon, a Red Eyes, and then reviving the Blue Eyes maybe is the only way to get there. So basically he's forced just to, you know, wall up, set some traps. But Ghost Rider is free to go on the aggressive and get in some more damage here. I'm not sure entirely about this Heraklinos attack, because the only thing that would wall the Ready Ari is maybe a Debris Dragon, and you could get it in a lot faster clock, but I don't mind it either, just to guarantee that you're getting these tags, you're getting the damage in. Ready Ari tags, we're getting Bestiari and just forcing the face down. Against Dragon Turbo, that's something that you want to do quite a bit, because them recklessing on your turn denies them an extra draw, whereas if they're able to draw for their turn and then reckless during their main phase, obviously they get an extra draw. And Spyral wants no part of it, just says he's going to negate with Heraklinos, then sets Deep Prison behind it, really just hedging against that possibility of Red Eyes into Blue Eyes type play. Now, Debris Dragon, Black Rose is already gone as well, so Debris Dragon into Black Rose isn't even a threat here. We use this Avarice, we just negate it right away, and now this is a Desperation Stone pot of Avarices I've ever seen one. You know, I don't necessarily know that I would have sequenced everything the same way in this game. I'm not sure I would have negated the Reckless specifically, but either way, once you've got Heraklinos and they're not very, it's not like he did a full combo beforehand, then maybe you wouldn't be able to prepare for it, but this is basically just solos him here. Reckless, the Rejuve doesn't do enough, and yeah, like this Ready Ari is going to come down here. You still have more discards, and it's just going to be really hard for Ghost Rider to win. So got to feel kind of bad for him, because Ghost Rider's gotten second, I believe, a couple events in a row now. And despite being really skilled with this Dragon Turbo deck, I genuinely think he's probably one of the best people at piloting it. And it's not so easy to pilot either. You know, there's similar to Glass, I guess. But he just, negates the stone, and it's just over. He scoops. We go to game 2. And yeah, opening that Prisma Tiger was pretty good. Also, Ghost Rider not having full combo. Here, he does this Ancient Fairy play. This is a pretty good heads-up play for people that might play Dragon Turbo to be aware of. You can use the Ancient Fairy effect special, and that allows him to make a Stardust turn 1, which is usually pretty good against Glads. But I will say, people, back in the day, I feel like you could just make a Stardust against Glads, like, clap them up, you know, like, no comeback. But with builds meaning, you know, more Deep Prison, more Compulse, more Shrink nowadays, like there's a lot of outs that they have to it, as well as just being able to survive for a couple turns by setting bodies until they find one of those outs. So even though I think this probably was Ghost Rider's best play here, it's certainly not like the auto win that you might expect. But the Red Eyes comes down, and he does use priority. You know, there's no need to fear a Chariot because the Stratos is still on the field. The Red Eyes swings over here and gets deprisoned. The Stardust attacks, and the Ancient Fairy attacks as well. Now, if the Murmillo was in deck, Spyral actually has a pretty neat play here, where he could go into... what am I trying to say? He could swing over this Ancient Fairy, and then with the Geyserist, like make Geyserist swing over, and then you can actually chain block the Murmillo to pop the Stardust. And I think the reason that Spyral deprisoned this Red Eyes is because he really doubted that Ghost Rider was going to take the risk and attack with the Stardust. Probably would have just left it there, and so he just eats a lot of damage and keeps the deprison, but that doesn't do that much for him. So, of course, to set the Murmillo, you know, just kind of an awkward spot, doesn't really have it. The cat maybe could do something here. I'd have to think a little bit more about his potential options, but you kind of just got to go for this play. No effect on the Geyserist because you don't have Chariot. You're swinging over, you get these, and you can tag for Heraclinos. So you got the Glad Engrave. That was kind of the point of setting Murmillo as well. And now you have the big body on the board that Stardust cannot get over. Now, it's a little tricky here because if Ghost Rider were to activate a spell or trap and Spyral negates, because Heraclinos still says negate the activation and destroy it, Stardust could actually negate it. So I think he has a pretty heads-up play here. In a sense, like, Heraclinos doesn't do anything then, other than just being a body that Stardust can't run over, and that, you know, nothing in his deck can run over except for Blue Eyes crashing. So still a pretty good play, I think, to make it, just what he had to do. But, you know, he can't use the Heraclinos' effect to the best of its ability. But luckily for Spyral, Ghost Rider draws pretty poorly off this card D. You know, no live cards. Like, if he had hit anything live, then he, you know, would be able to force it through the Heraclinos, and Spyral wouldn't be able to negate. But now we're in a pretty great spot where we can just swing over the Stardust, just get a lot of value here. You know, the Raikou is probably going to pop the Heraclinos, but still, like, Ghost Rider doesn't have anything. Like, he needs to draw a discard target. And like we're getting value. Like, the game's basically going to be over next turn because we can sort of threaten another Heraclinos if we want to. We use the MST and just, yeah, it's pretty curtains from here. Like, you swing with both these, you can get Darius Laquari and make another Heraclinos, which I believe is exactly what he does. And there we go. He just shows him the extra one to know that he's not cheating, and Spyral is out of there. You know, kind of a heartbreaker loss for him. Like I said, you know, second place a few times in a row doesn't feel good. But there's, you know, one other replay that I wanted to check out, and I don't want to go quite as in detail, but let me see. So this is against Value Turbo. This is one of the earlier rounds in the tournament. I just took all the replays from his tournament run and was looking over some of them. So he Greffers here and switches, you know, just hits the Value. Like, Spyral's playing it pretty slow. You know, he has to out this Greffer. Doesn't really predict this Solemn, but he's still in a decent spot where he might have to Chariot this, but he lets it go because I guess he can crack back over it with the Ready Ari on his turn. Just takes these attacks and has the Compulse for potential Value Synchro. Now swings over here, and unfortunately, you know, he can't tag for Murmillo. He probably just gets a Laquari here, sets, but he has a lot of defense. He still has that Starlight Road too, so Storm is not a threat. You know, one of these types of setups in this deck where you have Starlight Road and a ton of back row, opponents are just kicking themselves because especially people don't really know how to play through that many back row, and a lot of them do different things, and Chariot's just so hard to deal with. But this is going to get answered pretty easily. Prison could have been Compulse there too, but keeping the Compulse for potential brain control perhaps. These get swung over and just goes in direct. The Oppression, you know, it gets forced here, but this guy's so low, he's at 200, so he's not going to be able to use another Oppression, and this is easily just going to get compulsed. So despite this guy having a really good start, he's basically just dead in the water here, where you're pushing with both monsters, you say you don't have Mirror Force, and that's game. As you see, we drew the hero signal at the end, didn't matter at all. You know, I think he resolved it like a couple times in total in this like 13 rounds of tournament. Now, this is really the game that I want to focus on. I might even just cut it after this, but the guy opens pretty strong, you know. Greffer, pitching Value, send Sirocco. Not even sure I would have done it in that order, but I think you send Sirocco, send Value there, but hey, whatever. Sets a Prison. Now, Spyral has a very, I believe people say, brown town hand, a lot of monsters. And I think he makes an excellent play here that in order to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of playing Glads, you got to be aware of this type of stuff. Like, people, look, people are so paranoid about Glads. Like, people are desperate to prevent tags. They don't want to deal with any of these shenanigans, and they'll bend over backwards. They'll do horrible neg themselves plays just to make sure that you don't get to tag. And you can really abuse that at the same time, they always want you to tag your bestiary so they can bottomless it. So if you have things like Shrinks, if you have Book of Moons, Compulses to protect against that, you can really catch people. Like, it's very easy, I feel, when I'm playing Glad, to see when someone's baiting me into, oh, you want them to tag out and use Oppression, or, you know, bait my bestie so you can bottomless, or similar with Geyserus and Solemns and things like that. So if you play around all that, like if you have perfect knowledge with Glads, I feel like it's one of the best decks. So making sure your reads are on point, but a level deeper than that is your mind games, because what Spyral does here, nothing short of a excellent play. Basically, he only has one way to get over this Grepper. He doesn't have a Tiger in hand. The Laquari wants to attack over it, but if this is any Battle Trap, which also, if this wasn't a Battle Trap, you might expect that he would send a Necroguard. Who knows if Necroguard is in this guy's deck? I don't know for sure. But it's just to say that it makes it a little bit more likely that this is a protective card, in my opinion. So you could summon the Laquari and risk it into that trap, and if it gets answered, then you really have no answer to the Grepper, and you're, to be honest, probably going to lose. But if you're able to trade one of these other Glads with the back row, then maybe you'd have a shot next turn of summoning the Laquari. Now, that's exactly what he decides to do, where he goes basically for a bait here, where he summons the Sam Knight and enters battle and swings, and the opponent must just be so freaked out about a potential Shrink, something like that, you know, or seeing a damage set, you wouldn't be able to respond, that he just auto-activates Deepers, and despite, you know, the attack would have been lower and it would have been destroyed. This is a very gutsy play that I don't think many people would make, let alone recognize that they could abuse the opponent's patterns in this type of way. And so I just thought this was a phenomenal play, and you gotta love to see it. And I can't remember if he actually wins this game because of it. I mean, it certainly puts him in a better spot, and it's almost irrelevant whether it finally works out in the end. You know, the opponent has a pretty strong start and has Dark Armed as well, so I'm not sure he's able to take this one. But either way, baiting out that interruption just puts you in such a better spot for the rest of the game. And I think, I mean, what does he do here? Hoploness. Maybe he does win this game, actually. Yeah, he isn't able to find enough darks, and I think he does win, because he can just end up like, you know, Geyserus in here, Ready Ariing, and yeah, you know, this is pretty curtains. Like, he can Ready Ari the thing, and he has multiple traps to interrupt. I'm just gonna call it there. Sorry, Wolf, you got kind of fucked up. But anyway, that's where I'm gonna end this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. You know, shout out to Spyral, shout out to Playtest IRL for first sharing that video, but I'll go back to the deck for a second. I think this is, you know, a pretty good take on GBs if you are a GB enthusiast, if you want to play GBs. And I think it'd be cool if people gave the deck a little more attention. I think it's pretty viable, maybe not best deck in the format status, but pretty good, and people should give it more of a shot than they do and be a little more prepared for it as well. So with that, peace guys, expect more videos soon, and I'll catch you on DB.